People, come on, stand to your feet, everybody. Stand to your feet with me if you can. And one quick last time, if you're a guest or visitor, can you just wave at me real quick? Just wave if you're a guest, first timer here at Lakewood Church. Come on, show them some love, family. We're so grateful you're here tonight. And we kicked off a relationship series last Sunday night called Covers. And we're talking about all things relationships and identity and all kinds of stuff. And we have a special treat in the house tonight. She resides in Dallas, outside of Dallas. And we're so grateful that she is here tonight with us. You may know her father, Bishop T.D. Jakes. But, she has two books that she's authored, Colliding with Destiny and Lost and Found. And if you can get a chance to check out the hub after service and pick these books up, phenomenal author, incredible story that she is telling and is traveling all over the world right now, ministering and preaching, and I believe is one of our generation's premier leaders. And ladies, make some noise real quick because God's given each of you a voice, and I believe she's one of your representatives, and we love her here at Lakewood Church. She's not a stranger here. She's been here before, but I want y'all to give her a huge Sunday night Lakewood Young Adult welcome to Miss Sarah Jakes. Come on, show her some love as she comes.
Good evening, Lakewood. I didn't wear my dancing shoes tonight because I didn't know that you all turned all the way up in Houston. We turn up in Dallas. I didn't know that y'all was turning up here as much as you do. I'm so honored to be here. Such a pleasure. Pastor Nick, thank you so much for the invitation, the hospitality, the spirit, and energy in which you all welcome me is always incredible. And I'm only like a little bit nervous because I feel like I'm amongst friends and family. So if you could smile at me all night. Don't fall asleep because I saw you dancing. It'd be terrible if I had to call you out from this stage. You guys be seated. She said, preach it, Sarah. So I do have a text tonight, and as I begin to tell my story, I'm going to tell two stories in a way. And my subject for tonight is called Protect the Light. And I think that as you grow and develop and experience different types of relationships, that you recognize how difficult it can be to protect yourself. Because we often find ourselves in these relationships that require that we give so much of ourselves. And then we often find ourselves losing our identities. And in my memoir, Lost and Found, I talked a lot about how I lost my identity. But it started long before relationships. It started before I got into one, which is why it's very important before you enter into any relationship that you recognize, one, where you've been broken, and two, what that brokenness, the actions that brokenness causes. So we're going to get right into it. I'm going to be speaking out of 1 Samuel, the 3rd chapter. And my iPad is doing the most. Verse 11 through 14. At the Potter's house, we say, if you have it, say amen. If you need a minute, say, wait a minute. You guys need to get an app. There's no reason for us to be waiting for you that long. 1 Samuel 3:11 says, Then the Lord said to Samuel, Behold, I will do something in Israel at which both ears of everyone who hears it will tingle. In that day I will perform against Eli all that I have spoken concerning his house from beginning to end. For I have told him that I will judge his house forever for the iniquities which he knows, because his sons made themselves vile, and he did not restrain them. And therefore I have sworn to the house of Eli, and that the iniquity of Eli's house shall not be atoned for by sacrifice or offering forever. So, as I said, my subject for tonight is called Protect the Light. And incidentally, at this point in the scripture, we have Samuel who's heard a word from the Lord. As a matter of fact, this was his first time hearing from God, because when God first called him, he was asleep. And, he heard his name called, and he, went running into Eli, which was the priest. He's staying in the temple, and the priest there was named Eli. And so he runs out to Eli, and he was like, you called me? And Eli was like, go back to sleep, dog. I didn't call you. And so God says Samuel's name again. And so he goes over to Eli and he's like, you called me? And he goes, really, I didn't, and stop waking me up. Go back to sleep. And then so Samuel comes up to Eli one more time when he hears God has called his name. And finally, it dawns on Eli that God is talking to him. And so when he realizes that God is trying to get Samuel's attention, he tells him, next time you hear the voice, say, speak, Lord, your servant is listening. You see, the reason why Samuel found himself living in a temple with a priest named Eli is because his mother prayed for him. She prayed for many years that she would be able to give birth because she was barren, and she made God a promise that if he was able to give her a child, that she would give the child back to the Lord. And so as she did conceive a child, 3 years after she conceived him, she gave him back to the Lord. Samuel was Hannah's sacrifice. And I'm not sure about you, but sometimes we have to sacrifice in the name of love. And so Samuel's mere existence has been created out of a sacrifice. I don't know about you, but sometimes I've made a promise to God that if he got me out of something, if he performed a miracle for me, that I would, if you help me pass this test, I will study every night for 4 hours. I promise, God. Because I know you all study, and so you all never have to worry about passing a test because it's down in your spirit, like really good. But there was a time in which I had to study the night before a test. And I would have to pray right before the test as well because I knew I had to study the night before the test. And I would say, God, if you would get me out of this, I promise you will never have to tell me to study for a test again. I'm going to be prepared. I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to take a lot of notes. And then some kind of way, God performed a miracle. And then after the miracle, I had forgot the promise. See, because it's not that I didn't want to study for the test. It's just that, God got me through that one. And so I didn't necessarily follow through on my end of the deal. And that's a very dangerous thing when we make God a promise that we can't keep. And most of us have found ourselves in relationships where we say, God, if you fix this one thing about the person I'm with, if you would perform this miracle for me, then I could just go all the way in. My parents would like him. I would like him for longer than the length of a movie. And we could really have something if you would perform this miracle. And so we're waiting for God to perform a miracle in the hearts of the people that we love. And sometimes we pray that God wouldn't change a person completely, but that he would at least be as present in their life as he is in ours. Have you all ever been connected to someone who didn't really have a relationship with God? And you knew you probably shouldn't be connected with them, and so instead of disconnecting, you just prayed that God would, download something in their spirit. Like, Lord, they're really cool. We listen to all this same music. I love going to the movies with them, but I know they're not serving you. And I know when I get in trouble, they're probably going to leave me alone. So instead of me leaving them alone, I want you to do something for me and save them. It's just me again. Have you ever sacrificed your heart for someone who didn't deserve it? Have you ever sacrificed your body for someone who didn't deserve it? Your finances, gave of yourself? Because you thought, if I give enough of myself to you, maybe one day you will validate me in such a way that has made the sacrifice worth it. That if I give you enough of my heart and I give you enough of my body and I'm your ride or die, baby, me and you against the world. You ever had to smize at your man like, listen, I'm going to be Bonnie and you going to be my Clyde. And then they hurt you and you say, that really, really hurt. And I would like to be disloyal, but because I've given you so much now, I'm gambling with my own heart, with my own finances, with my own body, and I really need to win. And I can't afford to walk away with nothing, so I'm going to keep pouring into you even though I've never received anything in return. That's just me again. So the interesting thing about the fact that Hannah has given her son away to the temple is that sometimes when you love someone, you have to let them go. Can you imagine as a mother that you prayed for a child and God finally gives you the child? And you know, babies are really cute when they come out, like they're adorable. Your baby is even cuter. I have 2 children. My son is 11, my daughter is 5, and they are amazing. They were really a lot more amazing before they could talk back. And before they could walk and touch things, when they were just those little babies full of so much hope and promise. And I couldn't imagine praying for that child and then 3 years later giving it back to God. Because sometimes God calls us to disconnect from the things that we love. He calls us to recognize that what he has for us is better than what we have right now, no matter how much we love it. No matter how much we think we need it, that he has something that is going to be worth the expense of us letting go. But you see, the problem is that once you've experienced a miracle in your life, that you don't think that you can get another one. Because if God came through for you one time, he may not do it again, so I'm going to hold on to this. And we often find ourselves with seasonal miracles that we make permanent. You get connected to a person because there's a lesson that they need to teach you in that season. And then when the lesson is over, we have fallen in love with the teacher instead of taking the lesson and moving on. And then we find ourselves with a teacher who can no longer teach us anything because they've already given us our lesson. So we have constricted our growth for a connection that we're no longer supposed to be connected to. So Hannah has sacrificed her miracle, given it to the priest, and now he's being raised in the temple by Eli. And Eli has 2 sons of his own. Can you imagine the very first time you hear from God, the very first time God wakes you up out of your sleep is to tell you about someone else? Think about all the things you pray for, all the desires of your heart. He didn't wake you up with the lottery numbers. He didn't wake you up with the secret to why you were born and your purpose on earth. He woke you up to tell you about somebody else. Listen, sleep is very important to me. It is a hobby. It's one of my favorite things to do. I can wake up in the morning, eat breakfast, and get back in the bed. I'm anointed to sleep, is what you all need to understand about me. So when my children sometimes wake me up for just like half a second, I forget I love them for a minute because it's like, don't wake me up out of my sleep. But Samuel has been woken up out of his sleep for God to tell him something. And what he has to tell him is that he is going to punish Eli for the sins of his sons. That he knew what his sons were doing, in some kind of way still decided to not restrain them the way he was supposed to. How many times has God told us something about someone in our life, but because we didn't want to hurt their feelings, or because we wanted to stay in good standing with them, we let them walk into a fire when we first smelled the smoke? You see, because we trick ourselves into believing that they're not going to listen to me anyway, so I'm not going to tell them. And then we watch our friends go through unnecessary troubles in relationships, in school, in things with their parents, but we knew all along that they were going to be in trouble. And so Samuel has been told by God that Eli is going to be punished for the sins of his sons, and there's nothing he can do to save them. Sometimes we feel like if we can't save a person, that we're not going to tell them that they're going to be in trouble anyway. And so Eli has listened to the word, and for Eli it was really confirmation, because Eli knew long ago that his sons were causing a little bit of trouble. And when I say a little bit of trouble, they were sleeping with some of the women in the church. They were drinking all of the wine, and they were making a mockery really of what he was doing as a priest. And so it took Eli's mess up to give Samuel his confirmation, because sometimes struggle happens around you to remind you of what's inside of you. That means that we find ourselves in environments where it's like being in the middle of a tornado, some type of way. We're in the center of this tornado, and everything around us is going bananas, and we end up forsaking what's happening around us, when what's happening around us was really meant to teach us what was inside of us. Let me tell you about it. So I grew up in church, and we dance, but it's not like you guys dance. We like shout, like really, really hard. Do you all know what shouting is? I would show you, but I don't know how. But in our service, I grew up really disliking church, if I may be honest with you all. If you know anything about me, you know I keep it 100, so I'm going to tell you the truth. I didn't always feel a part of church. I didn't really, once again, I didn't know how to shout. It's a very aggressive type of dancing that you really need to just jump. It's kind of like double dutch, like you don't really know. You can't really catch the rhythm sometimes, and so I decided not to shout, and then so if you don't shout, you at least got to clap on beat and pump everyone else up. But once again, the clapping is like double dutch, and I can't always, my rhythm's a little suspect, so that part is not for me. Not for me either. When you're raised as Bishop Jake's daughter, the first thing people want to know is, can you sing? Because I guess as a preacher's daughter, you're supposed to be born with a voice. I like to call myself a rapper. But singing's not really my thing either. And then I would hear all the time in service about what the people in leadership were doing behind the scenes. And I don't mean regular things like just going to work and going to church. I mean, you got to hear why they were on the altar. And it changes your perception a little bit when you understand that the people who are leading you to God are struggling with God themselves. And so because they didn't live a perfect life, I didn't want anything to do with church, because I felt like the least you could do is live the life that you're preaching about. I was too young at the time to recognize that there is no place in God where you have it all together. There is no place in God where, whether you're on leadership on the stage or in the back of the pew, where trouble avoids you. Some kind of way, no matter what we do on Sundays, regardless of what we feel when we're in the presence of God, that there's something about life that challenges the feelings that we have when we're in this room. It comes to kill, steal, and destroy the Spirit of God within us. But I didn't know this. I didn't want anything to do with church people. And I ended up resenting my surroundings. So when I found myself pregnant at the age of 13 and having my baby at the age of 14, I resented church even more, because I knew that I was going to be the one that they were talking about. And God has delivered me in a way, but I used to have a little bit of an attitude problem. And so I told them that I didn't want to go to church because I didn't want to have to go off on anybody for reminding me of who I was. I know you all don't go off on people because you guys go to Lakewood, and no one at Lakewood goes off on people. But I didn't want to be reminded over and over again that I had messed up. And when people are around you, they have this way of keeping a record of all of the things that you've done wrong. And it's even worse when those things are true and they're things that you have yet to really accept. And so because I had that insecurity, I had to put a mask on and pretend that I was okay. I had to rush my healing process and put a Band-Aid over a gunshot wound because I didn't want anyone to see how infected my wound really was. And something happens to us between the age of 0 to when we find ourselves in relationships where we can be wounded. Wounded in such a way that relationships are no longer about coming together and being stronger, but they're about making us feel better about the fact that we've been broken. If you would love my insecurity, because I don't love my insecurity, if I could get you to love me, then maybe I really am lovable. I didn't really feel like my mom loved me, didn't feel like my dad loved me, my cousins don't love me, I'm not doing well in school. If I could just get this one relationship right. My parents didn't stay together. They divorced when I was young. I have no idea what marriage is. If I could just get something right, if I could just give my children the life that I wanted to have, then maybe, just maybe, I could be whole again. And so we create this image in our head of what our life should look like, and then all of our decisions are created at that point to make this vision a reality. We never once stop to ask God, what is your plan for my life? What could you do with this brokenness? What could you do with this insecurity? What could you do with the sacrifices that I've made? Is there any way that you can even make a miracle out of the things that I've lost? See, it's one thing when you don't trust yourself, but it's another thing when you tell God, I don't even know if I could trust you with what's happened to me. I know they say all things work together for the good of those who love him, but you don't know what all I have to work with here. We isolate ourselves by the things that have happened to us, and we think, well, she wasn't a teen mom, and that's why she got to go to become a lawyer, and she had a better start than I did, and that's why they got to go on to become a doctor or a politician. And dreams are for people who haven't messed up, and life is for the rest of us. We talk ourselves out our destiny with one mistake. Incidentally, it was here at Lakewood when I discovered a glimpse of what was inside of me. We were having our conference women that were loosed here, and I was introducing my father, and I was blogging at the time, and so people were kind of following my blog, and the conference department asked me, would I be willing to introduce my dad? And I was like, sure. And they were like, we're having a conference at Lakewood, and I was like, no. I'm not getting on the Lakewood stage. And so they, did some more talking. I was like, fine, I'll get up there, 30 seconds, I'll say my little thing, and I'll come off the stage, and that'll be that. And so I decided that I was going to tell everyone at the conference and everyone streaming online about the fact that I had my son as a teenager and that my father's ministry had helped free me from the shame of my own past. See, I got pregnant before Twitter and Facebook and before you could know something, before TMZ published it. I was pregnant before any of that. And so it was really just a rumor that T.D. Jakes may have had a daughter that got pregnant at an early age, but no one had any evidence until I opened my mouth. And so I got on stage and I told my story, and what was supposed to be just a moment between he and I turned into something bigger than I could even imagine, because now I have people coming up to me who are 50 and 60 years old telling me that I had my son at the age of 14, and when you got up there, you freed me from my past. And I think that's important for us to recognize that there's something inside of us that we're ashamed of, that all of us have a skeleton in our closet, that all of us have something that if we put it on the Lakewood screen, you would go running out the door. We all have these secrets, these ugly truths about ourselves, and the reality is that until we learn to love and embrace them, that we hide them. And as long as we're hiding it, we're hiding someone's key to their own freedom. That there's something inside of you, something that you've gone through that has the ability to help someone else and to heal someone else. But it hasn't healed you yet. So right now you're still resenting the very thing that could heal you. Because it wasn't until I got on stage and admitted to my pregnancy that I was able to really retrace my steps and realize that I made a lot of decisions out of insecurities, a lot of relationship decisions out of insecurities, because I didn't think anyone would want a teen mom. And so the first shot that I had at love, I was the ride or die chick. Ride or die. You hurt me, I'm still with you. I forgive you. I want to show you the power of forgiveness. You cheat on me over and over again. That's okay. I'm going to forgive like God forgives, because I'm just going to give my love away, because I know that when I give my love away, some kind of way it's going to boomerang. But what happens when you're giving your love away for the wrong reasons? When you're not giving your love away because you believe in the strength of your love, but you're giving your love away because you feel so weak. And you're depending on love from someone else to some type of way rejuvenate you and give you strength. But the reality is that that type of strength can only come from one person. And we find ourselves making our partners in our relationship our saviors. Save me from myself. Save me from my past. Save me from my misery. Save me from all of the things that dared to break me. Please love me until I'm able to love myself. Please look at me and tell me why I'm valuable. Look at me and tell me how God could still use me. Just if you could, look beyond all of this mess that I've made. The first person who says, I love you and I don't care the fact that you had a baby as a teenager. I married. I was like, listen, I love you. That was it, nothing else. And I know you have your issues, and your issues may be that there are other women, but that's okay, because I'm going to love you enough until the other women don't matter. I'm going to love your insecurities so much that we're going to be whole together. So we're both broken right now, but some kind of way we're going to come together, and instead of producing more brokenness, we're going to be whole. I have no idea how it's going to happen right now, if I'm being honest. But I grew up hearing that love conquers all. But what happens when you're abusing love? What happens when you're abusing love, when your love has no restraints? I chose this text because though it's not about a husband and a wife or a relationship as we generally are used to seeing, I chose it because Eli is paying for the punishment of his sons, because though he was able to help Samuel hear the voice of God and he was able to help Hannah realize her miracle, when it came to his own sons, he didn't restrain them at all. He let them do whatever they wanted, but he was riding for them until he had to die for them. So what do you do when you're riding for someone who's hurting you? When your loyalty is being confused with desperation right now. There's a difference between loyalty and desperation. Desperation says no matter what you do, my love doesn't cost a thing. My love doesn't require integrity. It doesn't require responsibility. It doesn't require respect. You can just have my love for free, and you can hurt me, you can abuse me in some kind of way. Because I've accepted this, I've now changed my definition of love. Even though I don't want it, I'm only responsible for what I've accepted at this point. Because we all want the white picket fence, but nobody wants to get out the paint. Nobody wants to do the work, because if you have to do the work required, you're going to have to recognize the sacrifice involved. And that sacrifice might require that you let go of the people who are hurting you, that you face the things that broke you so that you can become whole and healed for the person that God really has for you, and not the person who makes you feel better about what happened to you. So Eli failed to do for his sons what he'd done for Hannah and what he'd done for Samuel, which was teach them to protect the light, to teach them the value of being called and the value that comes when you are connected with someone who can make you better. Because there's nothing worse than being connected to someone who can make you better, but you decide to go off and do your own thing because you don't have the discipline required to make love work. Even our relationships with God, right? He's always there, he's present, but he requires us to let go of some things. And sometimes the things that he requires us to let go of, it doesn't always feel good when he tells us to let them go. As a matter of fact, some of us can ignore God's call and tell him, when we get finished in about 6 months, I'll let you have your way. You know, like, I'm going to keep working on him a little bit, and then when I'm finished, I'll turn him over to you, and you and I together, Lord. See, we working together. I'm trying to take pressure off of you. God, we're going to do this thing together. God doesn't need our help. He doesn't need us to be someone's savior. And because we are so broken that we need to be needed, we only attract people who can break us even more. Codependency masks as love. We need each other. We don't build each other up. We don't make each other better. I go home crying every single night. I don't know when the next explosion is going to be. We might have to cuss each other. Oh, wait, y'all don't cuss each other out at Lakewood. We might have to say some things to one another. We may have to say some hurtful things to one another, but that's how we express ourselves, and that's our relationship, and that is the culture in which we believe that love is supposed to live. We poison our love with ego. We poison our love with the mistakes of our past, and then we wonder why our relationships won't work. Why is it that you can't love me? So I'm going to tell you all a story, and you guys aren't going to judge me because we're family. But I want to tell you about, I want to tell you about when I got married to the first person who accepted my insecurities. And even though, like I said, I knew he had problems with women, I didn't necessarily think that they would last forever. And I was willing to take 5 years of heartbreak if that meant we could have 20 years of marriage. And that was the image that I had created in my head. And for all intents and purposes, we looked very happy on the outside. And really, that's all that mattered to me, because I was tired of walking around without a ring, even though I had a baby. And so it was all working together on the outside, and I would just fix everything on the back end, and that's how it was going to work. But every time I tried to create this life, it was torn apart by another woman, another incident, another issue, another struggle. Each time I tried to create this image, this facade, something came along that broke it. And one of the most pivotal points in our relationship came when I was cooking dinner for the children. And he had gone upstairs to give one of them a bath or something. I looked outside and there was a car running. And so I knew when I saw the car running, there was someone in it. And that person was probably going to be a woman. And so I had to prepare myself to really, because I was going to confront her. I wasn't just going to let her be outside my house. I was going to say something. And so I had to become a spy, because I didn't want to make that much noise, because I wanted to confront her without any excuses of, oh, but let me explain. I wanted to hear it from her mouth. And so I, like Spy Kids or Colombiana, whatever, or Salt, whatever you guys want to call me, I creeped outside of the house, and I made my way to the car window on the passenger side. And as I expected, there was a woman there, and I knocked on the window. And, I started off very soft, because I didn't know what my plan was, but I thought I'd just, see where we go with this. And so I said, what are you doing with my husband? And she said, we kicking it. And that's when things got complicated. Because we don't kick it with people's husbands where I'm from at all. And so I got in my car, which was an SUV, and I pulled up behind the car, once again, not really sure where we were headed with this thing. And then all I had in my spirit at the time was to ram the car over and over again, until they called the police on me. That's when things got really complicated. Because the officer needed to understand what was happening. And so I told the officer, well, my husband brought his girlfriend to our house, and I had a problem with that. And the officer said, well, I see how that could be an issue. And I was like, yeah, go talk to them about that. And so he goes over and he's talking to them. And so 3 months later, the same girl who I was ramming the cars with is pregnant. Wow. I want to take you out to eat after this. I've had to tell this story because I wrote about it in my memoir, Lost and Found. That is the first time that's ever happened. That's awesome. So the girl is pregnant and she's due on my birthday. So I was in a predicament. And as angry as I wanted to be at him and at her, I had to take a bit of responsibility for the fact that I married someone out of insecurity and then had to pay the price with more insecurity. You see, because whatever initially draws you to a person is all you're going to be able to produce after that. So if our draw is insecurity, if that's why we're together, I have to hide the fact that I'm a strong-minded, and I have to hide all of that just so that you can love me, then I'll have to pretend to be that person for the remainder of our relationship. And I had a hard time pretending because I thought that there would come this moment where I would stop pretending and then I would be able to be the person who I always was. I was willing to dim my light so that he could shine, but eventually I wanted to shine too. But I was okay with that because I thought that the sacrifice that I was experiencing in that moment would pay off in the end. I gave my love away for free, ride or die. to the very end, right? And then the very thing that I was sacrificing for, I ended up having to sacrifice all of who I was. And I found myself broken on a blog complaining about the fact that I did everything that they told me to do in church to get married, that would fix the pregnancy. And I was trying to stay loyal to my husband, and we had all of these different things happening. And I kept trying and trying and trying. And when I would pray, I would say, God, please, if you can, get them, because I am your humble servant and I have done nothing wrong. And I continue to experience this pain over and over again, but never once retracing my steps back to the fact that I started settling long before there was another woman. That I was pointing the finger at them, but that there was another woman inside of me, and that other woman, that broken, insecure, can't love your past woman that was existing inside of me, got to choose who I fell in love with. And so the problem became when I discovered my purpose and I discovered my voice and I discovered more things to love about myself, that I no longer needed someone to pacify me about my insecurity, because I learned to love those. And the reality is that if you wait long enough and if you dare to fall in love with yourself, that you don't have to pick someone out of desperation. That you don't have to settle for someone because you're afraid that you're going to end up just like your mom and she doesn't have anyone and you don't want to be like her, or you were raised as in a single parent home and that you don't want that for your children, and so you're dying to create this image and you're going to die creating that image. Because ultimately, our responsibility, regardless of what we've gone through, is to ask God, what can you do with my life? I hear you calling me. I thought it was Eli, but I've discovered that it's you, and I want to know, what can you do through my life? And the first thing that God tells Samuel is about someone else. And so now I think that we are at a stage and age where we must always think about the relationships around us. That God may say something to us about the relationships around us, and it is our responsibility to not just hear that word, but to learn from it. What can you learn from the relationships around you that can make you better? Not what can we gossip about, not what can we tweet about or subtweet about. What is it about the relationships around me, about my friend and her boo, about my parents, about my mother, about my cousins, about my sister? What is it about that relationship that has a lesson for me? Because at the end of the day, this life is about discovering all that God has placed inside of us so that we can then help someone else. And we get too busy trying to figure out what God is doing in somebody else's life to figure out how we could learn how to avoid it in our own life. You see, because although God wasn't talking to Samuel about Samuel, he was teaching Samuel something about where he was taking him. He was teaching him that I'm going to take you some places and you're going to be the next one. And I'm not ready to tell you that you're going to be next yet, but all I'm going to tell you is that the last person I put in your position messed it up because they weren't willing to tell the truth to the people who were closest to them. And so when you deliver that message to Eli, keep a note for yourself. And let that note be that when I get my opportunity, whenever I get my chance to touch another life, whenever I get this promotion, whenever I pass this class, whenever I get this, I'm going to do things differently than he did. When's the last time you learned from the people instead of judging them? When is the last time you have that one friend that, the one friend that you had to be careful where you invite places because, they like to, turn it up, and sometimes it's time to turn down. And so you got to be careful where you invite her. But when is the last time you took a minute to really consider her thought process, her home life, what she's gone through, and not just judged her or him, but learn from them? You see, because Eli taught Samuel how to hear God's voice but couldn't do it for his son. See, life isn't just black and white. Sometimes the people who help you also hurt you. Because as upset as I was with my ex-husband, and as upset as I was with the police report that was filed on me, and as upset as I was about the CPS classes I had to take because I was showing out, I would have never had a blog had I never been with him. Because I would have never had pain. And out of our pain, our purpose is birthed. And you will look back on all of the things that happened in your life, both good and bad, and you will be thankful for them all because they led you closer to God. When you recognize that all things work together for the good of those who love him, and that means every single thing, that God is so gracious that even when we are outside of his will, when we make the decision to come back in alignment, that he is willing to take even the mistakes and errors and detours and incorporate that into his master plan. Was it in his will for me to have a baby at the age of 14? Maybe not, but he knew it was going to happen. And because he knew it was going to happen, it was on me to believe that he could still use it. So when is the last time you fell in love with the things that God could use to help save the world? Literally the world. Literally, it could be a ripple effect. Your willingness to accept that one dirty little secret in your life. Your willingness to confront the essence of your very truth. Your insecurity, your willingness to do that can teach someone else who's been in your position. And you could save someone from going through the things that you had to go through. The reason why I called this Protect the Light is because I believe that much of life is about trying to extinguish our light. And our faith is the fuel that reminds us that our light doesn't have to be extinguished unless we decide to blow it out. That we don't have to stop shining, and that we don't have to believe that our past is so dirty that God can't use us, that some kind of way, or that we don't have to settle for relationships and dim our lights for other people. That God can still use us in spite of us. Literally, the Hebrew term for restrain is to be weak, to despond, to grow dull, darken, or be dim. Eli was in trouble because he did not restrain his sons. That means that he dimmed his light in the face of those who he said he loved. That he decided to be lesser than so that they could still feel accepted. And I want to challenge you all tonight to not dim your light. I was doing research for tonight, and I wanted to know what light bulbs were made out of. And the inside of the light bulb is made out of a metal called tungsten. And tungsten is a type of metal, one of the only types of metal that could be heated without melting. And so because it doesn't melt, that means that there won't be a combustion. But the reality is that even tungsten can create a combustion, and so they have to seal it into the light bulb. So in case there is a combustion, no one is hurt. And so they have to restrain the light with the light bulb. They have to protect the light. Not because the light won't shine, but because if you aren't careful, when you give your light away, it could cause a combustion that you're not prepared for. The reality is that there was this song by J-Lo, and when J-Lo was J-Lo, and it's My Love Don't Cost a Thing, right? If you want to keep me, I should. It was just me. I used to order it on the box all the time. And so on the box, shout out. And so I used to listen to this song all the time, and I was thinking as I was preparing for this that it's kind of misleading because we end up giving our love away so freely, so ride or die, so no matter what, I got your back, that we dim our lights. We forget to protect our lights, and then we grieve and are burned by explosions that we created but never had to experience had we learned to just protect the light. Had we decided to not be heated to such a point that we melted and turned into someone we didn't really understand? Had we learned our limits and set boundaries and recognized that I can love you and leave you at the same time? That we don't have to feel guilty for loving ourselves the way that God would love us. You see, because there's going to come this point in life where all of us are going to be faced with these relationships, whether they're a spouse or friendship or whatever, and we're going to come to this point where that friendship becomes toxic when you outgrow someone. And when you make a decision to stay connected with something in spite of the poison that is being created in your life, that when judgment comes, no matter how loyal you were, no matter how right you were, that you could pay for their mistakes. That God can't bless you the way he really could because you're connected to someone who's living outside of his will. That his promises for your life are yes and amen and true. They're true. But that we may not be able to fully access them until we're willing to let go. And that doesn't make you less of a person, and that doesn't mean that you weren't as loyal as you thought you were, but sometimes you can't feel guilty for being loyal to yourself. You can't feel guilty for choosing you and deciding to become better. When you feel like disconnecting with someone could make you better and you stay connected with them, you are making a decision to be poisoned. And the poison can be very slow. When Samuel told Eli that God was going to get him, which imagine that, like how do you tell someone who's been there for you? He's been living with Eli for most of his life. When he has to tell them that judgment is going to follow him for all of the things that he has done, instead of protecting him from the truth, he told him, this is what's going to happen to you. Imagine the difficulty he must have faced. But you have to stand for what's true even when it hurts the people around you. It's not fair to them and it's not fair to God for you to pretend that you don't know better when you do. And there are a lot of us who experience heartbreaks in relationships. And some of them take us by surprise, but most of them we know about. We knew when we got into it that we were going to be breaking our own heart. We knew the moment we started settling that it was going to be a cycle of settling. But because we gambled, we couldn't afford to lose, so we kept putting our chips in. Keep giving more and more and more and walking away with nothing. But I'm here to tell you that God can restore everything that you've lost. That regardless of the relationship or the struggle or the pain that you experience, that God can restore all that you've lost. I promise you, if they would have told me before I introduced my father that one day you're going to introduce him now and then one day you're going to get up and you're going to speak to the young adults at Lakewood on that very same stage you just watched, I'd have been like, girl, stop. I would never, ever do that. Let me tell you, my knees shake when I speak. I have to have a pep talk, like a real good pep talk, like at any given Sunday, Friday Night Lights pep talk before I get on the stage, like, you got this. You know, God is just going to say, you don't even have to know what you're going to say because God is just going to come through. But the reality is that I never would have discovered what was inside of me had I never experienced the pain that broke me open for his purpose. And that survival taught me a valuable lesson. It taught me that there was more to me than what broke me. That if I was willing to look beyond the initial pain of a heartbreak, that I could discover the healing that comes when God does perfect surgery. That he can fix our most infected wounds. That we could be connected with someone for years and years, and we can feel like, where am I going to start if I leave him? And how could I even create a new life? And how could I pick up the pieces? And how could I love myself? That God can teach you to love yourself. I started loving myself long before I got my divorce. It wasn't until I could fully love myself and get into alignment that I could hear God's voice clearly, because I didn't want a divorce before I started loving myself. Because I felt like this may be my only shot, this may be my only chance. I'm going to do whatever I can to make it work. And then when I fell in love with God and fell in love with myself, then God could give me direction and orders, and he could tell me, I know it might be a little embarrassing to file for divorce, and I know you've got this church record that you think no one can understand with this teen pregnancy and all of this, but if you would just trust me with all of that, if you would just stop listening to the opinions of others, and if you would stop judging yourself long enough for me to tell you who I've called you to be, then I could put you in a place where I could really use you for my glory. That your shattered pieces are simply more for me to create a masterpiece with. And sometimes we have to be willing to break a little bit more to heal a lot. I want to ask you all to stand with me, because I believe that there may be some people in the room who understand what it's like to sign up to be broken. That some of us have put ourselves in relationships and in situations that devalued us in such a way that we don't even know what to love about ourselves anymore. That because we were counting on someone else to teach us about ourselves and to teach us how to love ourselves, that we're even more lost and more broken than we were before we got into a relationship. That there are some of us who are so desperate to be in a relationship for all of the wrong reasons. That we believe that our whole value is going to be set on whether or not someone can love us. I want to challenge you to recognize that regardless of how you grew up, regardless of why you think you need this image of love and this concept of a white picket fence, regardless of why you think you need that the reality is that all you need is God. All you need is faith and trust in God to believe that in spite of what you've gone through, that another person doesn't have to be your savior. They could be your helpmate. That when you love someone, you have to teach them restraint. My daughter's 5, and she calls herself a gospel gangster. And so part of my responsibility as her mother is to help her restrain the gangster. We can't extinguish it because you need a little gangster. But to teach her the beauty that comes with fully recognizing that love means that there are rules. And there is responsibility, and there is integrity, and anything that threatens to rob you of that, to rob you of your dignity, to dare to disrespect you, can't be love. It can't be love. If you walk away feeling disrespected, if you walk away feeling like less than, if you walk away feeling more broken than you were, that's not love. Love doesn't mean that everything is going to be easy. It just means it's all going to work together for your good. There's a difference between hard and brokenness. The person you're connected with, friendship, relationship, whoever that may be, they can't break you. They can't break what God is trying to build up. Don't fall in love with the dysfunction because it's comfortable. Dare to break the cycle of friendships. We have these friends who go through the same thing, and we feel like, well, because she's going through the same thing, this must be what love is, and so I'm going to settle. That doesn't have to be what love is. That just because she was willing to settle doesn't mean you have to settle. That you can be the change that you want to see. And the type of love that you have for yourself, you will attract in all of the relationships around you. But it starts with you. You are the light. And your job is to protect that light inside of you. And anytime you find yourself dimming so that someone else can feel better about who they are, you have disrespected yourself. And you're going to want a villain You're going to want a villain because that's what we do when we feel like we've been victimized. We need a villain. We need revenge. We need to ram cars and have the police called on us. But the reality is we really need a mirror. We don't need a villain. We need a mirror. We need to be able to look at ourselves and really see, what was it about me that accepted this? What was it about me that convinced me that I didn't deserve any more than this? And then when you find that thing, you have to dare to love it. You have to dare to love your past. Because if you don't, you're going to repeat it. You're going to repeat it over and over again because it's all you see about yourself. And until you see why you had to go through that to get to this, you're going to resent it. And there's nothing worse than resenting who you are. Because God said that we were fearfully and wonderfully made, and we can't say that we're only fearfully and wonderfully made on this part, but the other part of me, it's not so good. Though he slay me, yet shall I trust in him. Wounded, scarred, broken, bruised. I'm going to trust him in spite of that because I know that even my ugliest scar he can use for his beautiful grace. And so, God, I'm going to turn it over to you. My life, it's not really extraordinary. I'm not the only teen mom. I'm not the only woman who's gone through a divorce. But there's something about me owning it that challenged someone else to own their truth. And I'm telling you, outside of the relationship that you have with people, that you have to have a relationship with yourself. And that relationship that you have with yourself can teach the people around you and your mother and your friends and your cousins and your whoever how to have a relationship with themselves. And then when you have that relationship mastered, you can open your eyes for someone else, but you can tell them, it's not J-Lo over here. This love has a price. It's going to cost you something. You're going to have to work for it, but I promise you this, I'm worth it. And I'm worth it outside of just material things, that there's something inside of me, there's a gift, there's an anointing, there's a talent inside of me that I have the responsibility to protect. And if you're going to be connected with me, you're going to have to protect it too. And so you're going to have to work out for me. I'm going to need to see how you protect your light. And I'm going to have to see who's around you, because when you're connected with me, you're going to get something, and you're going to like what you get. But I need to know that you understand what you're getting. And I need to understand that you deserve it. And there's nothing wrong with setting your price. You don't have to be on clearance because of what happened to you. So, I want to challenge you to leave the bargain basement love right where you found it, and to elevate yourself in such a way that you believe what God said about you is true. That his strength is made perfect in your weaknesses, and that in spite of all that you've gone through, that God can use you, and that he can connect you and bring you people into your life who understand from the moment they see you that you're a gift. And that you won't have to explain yourself, and you won't have to put on a resume, because they're going to look at you and they're going to see the light that you've worked so hard to protect. They're going to see all that you worked for and all that you had to go through, and they're going to love it. They're not going to judge it, because they are going to know that you went through all of that so that you could be with them. They won't resent the past, and you shouldn't either. Thank you, Lakewood.